An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 100. I'm Aaron Pollier.
And I'm Darlene.
And we said last time that we were going to watch This Island Earth. And we did. From 1955, it's in glorious Technicolor. We have a Blu-ray copy of this movie because this is a classic, and I tend to get the classics as standalone movies instead of like renting them on Amazon Prime or anything like that. And I'll say that the quality of our Blu-ray that we had was excellent. Excellent picture quality, excellent sound. And at the very least, the Blu-ray that we had a lot of extras on it. So I watched the documentary about the making of this film by myself after we had watched it. But Darlene and I are going to talk about the film first and then kind of go into some of the behind the scene details. Have you ever seen this film before? Yes.
It's 86 minutes long.
Okay, so yes, but how? Okay, I know that you've seen it with the MST3K version of it, which I have.
I can swear that I probably watched it on one of those old night.
Yeah?
Yeah, or I should say early morning.
Now, this is, to me, I don't remember ever having seen it before the MST3K version. Because I didn't recognize any parts of it, which is shocking because of how iconic this movie is. You would have thought that it would have been shown on WGN or something like that, and I'm sure it did. I'm sure it had been shown, but I honestly don't remember a thing about it before I saw the MST3K version of it.
When it came out, it was doubled with Abbott and Costello Meets the Mummy, but it also, when in 1960, it doubled with Forbidden Planet.
And there's a lot of reasons why those two movies that it was paired with occurred. Abbott and Costello, the Abbott and Costello movies, they were also Universals. And a lot of the props were transferred between this movie and let me look at my notes really quick. I'm sorry that I don't have this right at hand. It is Abbott and Costello Go to Mars. There's props from Abbott and Costello Go to Mars that were used in this movie to help bring down costs.
Budget here is
it's huge.
$800,000.
Yeah, so
and they made 1.7 million. What did I say it was? Like the 17th
largest grossing
for that year?
For that year, which isn't that high when you think about it, but I'm sure that like other movies in general, like Westerns, always did way better at the time. An $800,000 budget in 1955, the round estimate is to multiply it by about 10. So it had a budget of about $8 million. Does this look like an $8 million film in today's money? No, I don't think so. I think this looks like an $80 million film or a $100 million film. And we'll go into the reasons why. There's lots of star power in this movie before we get into it. This movie is like a reunion for many of the previous films that we've watched. We have Jeff Morrow in there as Exeter.
You should start with who wrote it.
Okay, so who wrote it, Darlene?
Raymond F. Jones, and it is the name of the novel is This Island Earth.
Okay.
Do you want to go into what This Island Earth really comes from?
Okay, so This Island Earth, the original title, since it was written for Amazing Stories, it was a reference to World War II. And it makes sense. Again, this is like the 1950s. Everyone remembers that is of an age, remembers the war. And if you're writing for science fiction in general, you're going to be old enough to have served in the war. So this island Earth refers to the Pacific Theater of Combat, specifically for the U.S., where the United States would go in to all these different little small islands, set up shop to build bases to help fight against the Japanese, and they would use native people that were living on these small islands to help construct the bases and to help with the war effort. This is where you start getting some of the weird cargo cult stuff that comes with us, like John Frum. There's certain islands that still worship Prince Charles. No, it's not Prince Charles. Excuse me, Prince Philip. They specifically worshipped Prince Philip, who's now dead. But they thought he was like a living god for a while. Long stories, but yeah, they still build totems of C-47s and ritualistically fly them over the island to help bring bounty to their people, like, because the war influenced these people so much. So anyway,
cargo dropped out of them.
Yeah, that's why you call them cargo cults. Well, it's one of the reasons, but cargo cults actually goes back even further than World War II. Regardless, the name comes from the fact that Earth in this story is effectively one of these islands. That there is a bigger war than mankind actually understands that is being fought, and that Earth is being used just like one of these islands, and that Earthlings are these native peoples. And I thought it's a very kind of thoughtful, philosophical title that generally you don't get in these 1950s science fiction movies. Mostly it's like Earth versus the Flying Saucers, or it came from beyond. Yeah.
Tarantula,
which again is another connection, by the way. This movie has a connection with Tarantula. The Exeter's house in this, before we even get into the plot, Exeter's house in this is the house of the professor that gets trashed in Tarantula, that gets wrecked.
Oh.
Yeah, seriously. It's...
They got trashed in this one, too.
Yes, but all the interiors are sets. So anyway, it's a fascinating movie. Obviously, we recommend it. We're going to talk about it a lot here. So we begin with the credits, and like most science fiction movies of the time, it's a star field, but it's moving.
But there isn't that very many people in this as cast.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We should talk about the cast first.
The cast.
I'm sorry. I was going to talk about the cast, then you got me kind of turned around. Jeff Morrow is Exeter, who we've seen in a few films. Faith Domargue. I had to look up how to pronounce her name properly, and I actually found it. It's Domargue. Faith Domargue as Dr. Ruth Adams, who's been in a few of these films, specifically because I really think that she's fantastic. It came from Beneath the Sea.
She's got sad eyes.
She has smoky eyes. That's what I always... It's not the makeup. I'm not talking about smoky makeup. It's that she's kind of sultry and sad at the same time.
Her eyes droop downward.
Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet she's been in. We haven't done that one, but she was a criminally underused actress because she has screen presence and acting chops. And she suffered in this movie, to say the least. She suffered in this movie. Rex Reason is Dr. Cal Meacham. Rex Reason is in a ton of films, including Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Creature Walks Among Us, Lady Godiva, lots and lots and lots of stuff. So we have seen this person a few times in our reviews. We need to also point out that Russell Johnson, the professor from Gilligan's Island, is also in this, and we have seen him at least a couple times already in other films. I think
one of the three main scientists.
Yes, in fact, in the documentary that I watched about this movie, they refer to Russell Johnson as the second lead, believe it or not, because even though Jeff Morrow is Exeter, probably has top billing, and he does have top billing, he's not the lead in this. He's arguably just the most famous actor that is in this at the time, and it's because he has such a large role in the film, but he's not our lead. Our lead is definitely Rex Reason as Dr. Cal Meacham and
Ruth. Dr. Ruth.
And believe it or not, Faith Domargue actually has a higher billing than Rex Reason. Like, because again, she arguably has a larger part of the drama in this film. Okay.
Haven't we seen the person that plays Breck too? Lance Fuller?
Yes, we have. And the person who plays the Monitor, the controller that is on Metaluna, we've seen him before, and very recently in one of our reviews. Can you remember where you have seen that face, Darlene?
It looks like he's the reporter for...
Exactly. He is the reporter in The Thing from Beyond. The Thing. Just, it's the 1950s The Thing. He is the reporter. So he is actually a really good actor, but again, he's criminally underused in this film. So there was a lot of production fun things that I've read about, but we'll get into that after we talk about the plot. We've talked a little bit about
and then
the cast.
The other ones are just short in there and very short things, including Neutron the cat.
Neutron the cat,
orangey.
Okay, Neutron the cat is fantastic because it gave me a big laugh. It gave me a really big laugh.
And some people say that's an error, but then you pointed
it's not.
out
It's ironic. We'll get to it. I'll describe why it's an amazingly funny joke, because it's told completely straight face.
But if you look on some of the
people will say it's a mistake.
It's a mistake, but
no, it's not. It's not. It is actually a fantastic, subtle, piece of dry humor, and we'll get to it. So, like I said, the credits begin with a starfield. The starfield is moving, and it says "This Island Earth." Again, Technicolor, so even the credits are like they pop right out at you. You have to agree, right, Darlene, that the color in this really pops.
I was writing down stuff at that time.
Okay, well, anyway, we then go to Washington, D.C., where it's a long par 5 to the nation's capital. I will be quoting MST3K every now and then, and yes, it is a beautiful shot of Washington, D.C. at the time. This is post-war, and the barracks and things have already been removed at this point.
And
we can see this,
and the what we call the castle.
The Smithsonian Castle.
Smithsonian Castle is really done beautifully.
Yeah, they obviously took a stock photograph from an airplane and then touched it up with extra color, because it's beautiful. It's beautiful. We right away meet Dr. Meacham, and he's boarding a jet and talking to a whole bunch of reporters. He's a civilian, and I say, well, wait a second, he's a civilian, but he's flying a military jet. In fact, he's flying what? T-33 Lockheed Shooting Star. And that is a military...
Borrowing it.
He's borrowing it. His friends at the Department of Defense are allowing him to borrow it. And he's actually a nuclear engineer and energy expert that also is pretty skilled in electronics, and he's been making some breakthroughs. He came to DC to talk to some politicians, I guess, and he's got to fly back to California to his own private airfield outside of Los Angeles.
I thought it was Nevada.
It says Los Angeles, California.
Oh,
yeah. This is where we actually get a tail number. That, of course, it's an airplane, and if I see a tail number, I am going to look it up, just because 90% of the time, we can actually find really good information on these aircraft, what happened to them. And if they're private aircraft, we can generally find out where they are today, if they're still around. And most of the time they are. So the tail number was actually, it's 52-9546N. So that means it was built in 1952. So it was still a fairly new jet. It's a Lockheed Shooting Star, like I said, but it actually crashed April 29th, 1955. So right after the filming of this movie, it crashed in Clines Corner, New Mexico. It didn't say if there was any casualties, but it was probably a training accident where this plane actually...
And tell them about what they stupidly do.
Oh, well, okay, so this is a common thing that does happen in 1950s movies, and I think I figured out why it happens. Would they show him flying from Washington, D.C. past Chicago, which is awesome because it's Chicago from 1955. So there are skyscrapers, but there aren't the skyscrapers of today yet. So you see some of the older ones, right? Then he flies over the Rocky Mountains, and we see the Grand Canyon. But during this scene of stock footage of him flying, they reverse the film, so everything is
facing the same direction, but it's the wrong way.
Yeah, everything's mirrored. Does that make sense? So all the lettering is backwards, but here's the reason why I think they do it, and they do it in most films. It's that if somebody is flying east to west, they want the airplane pointing to the left hand of the screen, because that's the way it would be pointing if it was flying on a map. I'm not joking, because if you look when they ditch out later on in the film in the airplane, and they're ditching out over the Pacific Ocean and they need to fly to California, they're pointing to the right. They're flying east. And the shot is actually reversed again, because the original footage showed the plane flying to the left of the screen. But you see this often in 1950s films. Once I have that little brainworm in you, folks, you're going to see it all the time in these films. Anyway, we get him to his own private airfield in Los Angeles, and he buzzes the control tower. And Darlene's like, "Oh crap, he would be grounded," because he really does buzz it at a very high speed. Because no one even hears.
From in the base that we had a couple of hot shot F-16 pilots, what they call storming the tower, blew out some windows.
Yeah, they pulled a Top Gun, a Maverick, and that's why even in MST3K they scream
grounded.
They scream Maverick in MST3K for this, but Meacham almost immediately loses control of the aircraft, and it's a little bit of a bad combination of footage, because they show his aircraft really nose down, and he keeps like flying right towards this like farm, this desert farm.
But at one point he's clear up in the air.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel very well connected. But right before he's about to hit, there's a green light that completely covers his plane, like a neon sign. Okay,
it glows all the way down.
It glows, and he doesn't know what the hell's going on, but he's able to land the plane at the airfield, and then the glow fades away. His assistant Joe meets him out at the strip and tells him that there was this high-pitched squeal that was happening while this green glow was on his plane. He's like, "So help me, I saw this." Meacham gets into his lab, and this is where he performs the secret government Ego project.
That was a Jeep, by the way.
There was a Jeep. He drove a Jeep, but we didn't get a number on it or anything like that, so I don't know if it's still around. And that would be a little more difficult to figure out with,
because it was just a military.
It's just a Willis Jeep.
No plates.
Again,
no
I
nothing.
apologize for the MST3K references. I will say at this point that the people that made the film, those that were still left alive when the MST3K version of this came out, did not like the MST3K version, because their version, the MST3K version, had edited out large chunks of the movie that actually made it make more sense than what we see in that MST3K, the movie. So it kind of butchered the movie, and I respect that, because watching this unedited, unbutchered, so to speak, it is actually a fantastic movie, and all the scenes kind of make sense why they're there. Regardless, I will often refer to the MST3K version because it's my shorthand for remembering what's in that scene. So it's the secret government Ego project. Meacham has this like huge, large lead plate that he's lowering into something that looks like a toaster, but I guess it's a reactor of some sort. It's like an atomic pile of some sort.
It's those fins on it are for
pumping fluid through.
No, they're actually like you would have on transformers to keep it cooler.
Okay. So what doesn't make sense to me is if he's lowering this lead plate into it, it shouldn't explode. It should actually damp out the reaction. But in this, he lowers it in, and it just blows up.
Yeah, he has a series of blowing up his lab.
Well, okay,
Which
Meacham
is all I wrote down on this thing.
Meacham generally has, he generally has a very bad string of luck with things just exploding around him. And it almost becomes a running gag in the film that he's just like a menace to everything around him.
Well, there's three explosions right here in this one sequence of him doing test after test, and he blows up.
Yeah, he doesn't believe in like failing at a safe level. Like, we're not going to fail safe. We're going to fail nuclear blast to the face. That's kind of his philosophy. So it's clearly a criticality project. It blows up. Meacham clearly destroys equipment as there's broken stuff all over his lab. And this is even before we get to the second thing that he blows up. There's melted transformers. There's blown fuses. You know, remember the whole tar melting out of the box that looks like ice cream cones melted on the top? Like, they just tested this and they blew it up. It doesn't matter. They just put as much power as they possibly can.
Well, he has
for
these
things.
little fuses.
Well, that's what he gets. He gets little fuses. So it turns out that his partner, Joe, ordered spares because they've blown up all their other equipment
Is
doing
that what
this
his
stuff.
name was?
Joe. Yeah, Joe. Joe Wilson. He's played by Robert Nichols. Anyway, Joe ordered a whole bunch of spares because they just blow things up in their lab. You know, they're not very safe, I guess. And he ended up getting these packages of spares that are completely different from what they're used to. They're tiny miniaturized components compared to these giant box-like things that they have been using. And Joe had gotten in like 4 of these little glass bead fuse things.
They look like a fuse with a
marble on it.
A red marble.
Yeah, right.
Stuck in between it.
So Joe says that when he got these, he didn't believe that they were what they said they were. And he said, I immediately tested it and it blew up. And Meacham's like, well, yeah, of course it would. It's somebody's playing a prank. And he goes, no, it blew up after it held 35,000 volts. And Meacham's like, wait, what? Let's see that again. So Joe pulls out another one of these things and they put it on the tester and blow it up.
And then he takes a drill to it.
Well, while they're testing it, though, this little red bead, this red marble, sits there and glows, and there's the same kind of hum that we heard from the airplane when it was glowing. And that's where they start putting things together slowly. So they blow it up, and he's like, wow, I can't believe it. It actually did hold 35,000 volts. They then call up, this is before the drill, they call up the electrical supplier that they ordered from, and the electrical supplier says, you're crazy, we never sent you anything, we've never received an order. And Joe's like, hold on a second, here's my receipt of the telegram that I sent this. And Meacham's like, well, they never got it, that means it got intercepted. So let's try to figure out what this stuff is made from. Somebody's clearly made a breakthrough. Let's try to figure this out. So they get a diamond drill and they try to drill into this.
Was it a diamond drill?
He specifically said it is a diamond drill, a diamond tip drill.
Because I laughed about the fact that he said this is the hardest substance too.
Yeah, it was a diamond drill, an industrial diamond drill. And he couldn't even put a mark on this fuse. All right. So
yeah.
Meacham gets a call from the hangar. And this is the mechanic. The mechanic basically says there's nothing wrong with your plane. There's no reason why it should have fallen out of the air and you should have lost control. And Meacham has to like jokingly admit to drinking, to having a few drinks. And he's like, no, I never really did drink, because Joe's looking at him. I didn't drink. I just had to have an explanation that didn't make me sound crazy. And being an alcoholic flying an airplane, I guess is a better explanation than a green glow saved my life for no good reason, and there was nothing wrong with my plane to begin with. Yeah, crazy. So they then have the interocitor delivered. Okay,
because there's a book.
Yeah, they have a catalog, and they're going through it, and the catalog is not made from paper; it's made of some sort of metal, and they decide that they're just going to place an order with them for all these parts that they kind of need. And it turns out they don't really get the parts, but they get another shipment, and it's called an interocitor. And so Joe and Meacham end up building it. And it's the amazing Technicolor cheese wedge. It's this desk-like thing that has these control dials in it. It has like an Atom logo on it with like flashing lights.
And rainbow control.
Yeah, those are like the
robs.
twist controls. Those are like the disc controls on the sides. They're like rainbow
Yeah.
colored. And there's like a triangular screen that like glows weird colors.
So it's a weird TV set looking thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you know this movie at all, what we're talking about, you know exactly what we're talking. Like, this is the amazing Technicolor cheese wedge.
I love the end of this interocitor.
Oh, the interocitor is fantastic. It's like it. Watching
I
this
like
again.
what Joe does.
Oh well, yeah, Joe.
He blows it up. I'll just give.
Well,
you
no, they don't blow it up. But technically, it's not their fault this blows up, but it does blow up. All right, so let's get to it. They plug it in, and then a magic voice tells them, "Please turn the dial, please, 14 degrees to the right," or whatever it is. And it turns out that Exeter appears on the amazing Technicolor cheese wedge. Exeter is played by
interocitor. Let's go with the word
interocitor. Okay.
Stop using the MST.
Okay. It's the interocitor. Exeter appears on it. Exeter, played by Jeff Morrow, does not look human.
No, he's got a forehead that's a mile long.
Yeah, he's got a forehead that's a mile long, and he's kind of red looking. Now,
red looking with white hair.
Believe it or not, Darlene, I found out why they look red.
Why?
Okay. In production, on the first day of filming, they found out that under normal lighting conditions, to normally light the scene and have everybody look normal, their hair looked blindingly bleached white.
It still does.
Okay, no, hold on. Badly white. You watch this movie and they're white haired. That's fine. It's that it was like shockingly white to the point that it looked like cotton candy. So what they had to do was every shot of Exeter, they had to actually tone the contrast down. Well, not I'm sorry, like the overall brightness of the scene down a bit to make it look like his hair was just white. So it made him look like he had lived his entire life in the sun. That's what Jeff Morrow said. And that's why all of the Metalunans look like they're sunburned all the time.
Oh, I just thought they were red.
No, that was not makeup. That was their regular skin tone, but they had to tweak the film after the fact to make their hair not look like complete
clown,
like a clown wig. Yeah, basically. Exeter says that Meacham has passed the aptitude test and that he'll get in contact with him again soon. And Exeter has Meacham put the order book, like in front of the interocitor, and the interocitor then shoots like laser beams. We later learn that these are neutrino rays, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of all right. But it sets fire to the book and starts melting it. And this is where Meacham, isn't it Meacham or is it Joe? No, it's Joe tries to unplug.
Joe unplugs it.
Yeah, he unplugs it from the wall.
Slag.
It unplugs it from the wall, but it doesn't matter because at this point, like the interocitor just implodes and burns and melts and becomes this pile of slag that looks like a horda. And it's actually a pretty cool special effects shot because they didn't forget about this metallic book that they had. There's like metal dripping off the lab table that's still from this melting book.
And they don't clean up, okay?
No one cleans. Yeah, the poor janitor. My God, that has to deal with this lab that's filled with like exploded equipment and like radioactive material.
I can just say that I am writing on the outside. It goes, I am not cleaning up this mess.
Yeah, screw you. I want children sometime. Like. So Meacham decides to go with an aircraft that Exeter sends to pick him up. It's a DC-3.
It's a
DC-3.
I thought it was a C-47.
C-47s are the military version of the DC-3. They're the same aircraft, but here it would be called a DC-3 because it was in civilian use. We actually looked it up again because we do get a tail number. It's tail number N79077, which means it was built in 1942.
It was a military one.
It was a military aircraft. It was sold after the war to a woman, and I'm trying to find where my notes are for
And
this.
you can kind of see her logo right under the number.
You know,
or is it above the number?
It's above the number, and I don't have the woman that bought it. She flew a small cargo service out of California, and then it was sold to a Mexican airline for cargo running in the late 1950s, and it was withdrawn from service sometime in the 1960s. There isn't a lot of information on this aircraft.
So the cartels dropped it.
I don't know. That's the thing. There's just absolutely no information about it. There's only generalized stuff. The only thing I know for sure is that it was built in 1942, and it did serve a small airline in Mexico at the end of its life. That's all I can tell. So anyway, there's a DC-3 that flies in. It's white. It has like its windows covered. It's an unmanned drone, which is pretty cool, right? He ends up getting into it. Meacham gets into it.
And it's got a blue interior.
It's got a weird interior. But there's an interocitor that's sitting in the cockpit area. And to me, it actually does look like they redressed the interior of a DC-3 for this. It does actually look legit. And we hear Exeter's voice through it saying, hey, relax. All of this is automated. You'll arrive at your destination. It's safe. Don't worry about it. Just lay back and relax. And
except at this time, they're already needing flight stuff. So this wouldn't have flew very well without some kind of...
It's alien technology, Darlene. It's an interocitor remote control flying this aircraft.
That's not what I'm saying. All the doggone towers from radar stuff from one side of the country to another would have been picking it up and going, what the crap?
You'd be surprised what 1955 meant for radar systems in the United States. Believe it or not. Anyway, he lands at a small airport in Georgia.
Ruth calls it, you're in Georgia.
Okay, so
she comes in a 1946 Ford Super
Deluxe.
The 2 words, station wagon.
Yeah, it's only a 9-year-old car in this time, so I'm sure like the original people watching this film would have been like, it's
an old car.
It's an old car, but to us, it's gorgeous.
It's got wood panels.
It actually has real wood paneling. Like, holy crap, I want that car. So Ruth comes and picks him up. Now, Ruth, again, is Faith Domargue, and that's Dr. Ruth Adams. She's also a nuclear scientist, and he immediately recognizes her. Cal immediately recognizes her, saying, "Whoa, remember we did this talk in Boston together. We were talking about we were talking to grad students, blah 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 blah. We even swam in a river together. It was super cold." And she's acting like she doesn't even know him. Okay. And obviously something's up here because it's clear that Meacham really does know her. And she looks very uncomfortable about that. But she's also really trying to act the fact that, oh, look, I don't know you. Ha ha ha. There are many scientists at this place that Exeter's running. There's a house in Georgia up on this hill. It's filled with scientists. They're all somehow related to nuclear research. Russell Johnson as Dr. Steve Carlson comes in. That's the professor from Gilligan's Island. I always refer to him as the professor because it's easy to remember exactly who that is. Exeter brings in Meacham into his office to explain what he's doing, and he wants scientists to work on research that will lead to peace on Earth, like limitless nuclear energy. Exeter then does like a demonstration of the powers of the interocitor, because obviously Meacham's already built one, correct? But he hasn't really seen all of what it can do. Exeter gives a very brief demonstration by showing him his laboratory that is currently being finished off, and Brock, one of the other Metalunans, is down there putting the finishing touches on it. Okay. Another interocitor calls, and Exeter asks Ruth and Cal to leave, and it turns out that it's the Metaluna Council, this guy that is the monitor calling. That's Douglas Spencer, the guy that was the reporter from The Thing. And he tells him to continue with Plan A. We then have a dinner scene at Exeter with Mozart playing. And Exeter says that he's never met the man when asked about what he thinks about Mozart. And then he goes, "Oh, I'm joking. That's right. You're speaking of your composer." And Meacham's like, "Our composer? It's everyone's composer, not just, mine or Ruth's." So it's, Exeter is clearly not doing well to pretend he's not an alien. He's got the giant forehead. He looks weird. He speaks like he's not really from Earth. Where was I? All the scientists at the facility are nuclear scientists. We've already said that. Meacham asks to be shown his lab, and Ruth and the professor take him down there while Brock watches on the interocitor. And this is where we're introduced very briefly to Neutron the cat. And Darlene, like you said, there are people that think this is a mistake, but this is clearly just dry scientist humor. The cat's name is Neutron because, as Ruth says, it's because he's always so positive. And then they just move on. And there's like a twinkle in her eye, which is incredibly good acting, but it's said in such a straight-faced way that we know that neutrons are neutral. There's no charge with a neutron. And they're all nuclear scientists. They know that, and it's a goddamn joke. And Meacham smiles, and the professor smiles. They don't do it much because it's dry humor. They don't really think it's funny, but it is hilarious. And I just had to say that because I don't want to have people think, oh, that's just a mistake in bad science. It was clearly a joke. Yes, the cat's name is Neutron, but they named that cat a neutron, and then made that joke about him. I.e., the cat probably has an attitude problem.
Yes,
right?
he does.
And he does. He just screams and hisses all the time because the cat knows when the interocitor's watching. Okay?
And hates it.
So he hisses, and the Meacham, Ruth, and the professor, they all like change how they're talking because they think they're not being watched. And as soon as the cat starts hissing, they go back to like completely.
Even though they stuck the lead.
This big lead test plate. Yeah, the interocitor can look right through it. Yep. So,
and then puts a hole through
it. Exeter, they also say that there's the Ruth and the professor have seen that Exeter has what they call a sun lamp. That's just what it looks like. And it seemingly rearranges brain cells that people that go sit underneath this sun lamp don't come back the same.
Exeter calls it a thought transformer.
It is a thought transformer, but Exeter also, later on, by the way, folks, Exeter is not a villain in this. Exeter is actually kind of a hero. He doesn't like using the thought transference thing. In fact, even refuses to use it.
on these three.
No, it
but
is
that's
implied.
That's what they were trying to prove with her saying she didn't know him.
Yeah, she was trying to cover up.
She was trying to prove whether he's been thought controlled or not.
Yeah. But it's implied later on that Exeter has been refusing to use this thing, and it's been Brock basically using the thought transference device. Okay, so.
Well, the reason why Exeter wasn't using it was because he says that doesn't give the free will that might be needed to get the
research done. Okay, because obviously all of these scientists are researching something. Obviously it's something to help the aliens. Anyway, the next day Meacham is working in his lab, and Exeter asks him to come put the lead plate closer to the interocitor that's in his lab. And the interocitor melts straight through the lead plate. Now, there's two reasons for this. One is that Exeter actually wants to show Meacham that he knows what was being talked about the night before.
And he also wants to show that there's a destructive neutron ray that they've got.
Neutrino ray. And yeah, he wants to show that, but it's not to scare Meacham. It's there. He's trying to do it like, hey, look, a radar beam is a weapon when it's used properly, when it's focused. You can cook food with a radar beam. That's what a microwave is.
I didn't get that yet.
There's microwaves in 1955. They're very not common, but the point is that he's like, anything in science can either be a tool or a weapon.
It can be used for good and bad.
Yeah, all it is a tool. And I think that's a very good point that Exeter is making. He's trying to show that anything can be used as a weapon if improperly done. Okay.
I don't know about the thought transformer. It can't be used. It shouldn't be.
Well, the thought transformer, think about what the thought transformer probably was used originally for. Helping, like, heal trauma or something like that. Like, hey, this person has, like...
we know what they used it for originally. It was to create those mutons.
The thought transformer? No, it wasn't. The the mutants were completely different. I'm just saying,
but they also destroyed their people because of that.
No, but I'm saying the thought transformer probably wasn't originally intended as a thought transformer. The technology was probably intended originally to do something completely different than that, as a tool, not as like a torture device.
Like somebody that's a psychopath.
Yeah. Or somebody that has had severe emotional trauma because of something, and they're trying to be healed. Rather than sitting with like a therapist trying to talk it out, they can just go, okay, hold on, we can do 20 years worth of therapy here in 5 minutes by using this thought machine that can help you go through your trauma. That's probably where it was, because to be frank, what we know about the Metalunans later, I'm sorry we're skipping around a little bit in the plot. The Metalunans they didn't start off as bad people. I don't even think that they are bad people even in the modern point that we see them. Like,
the higher ups are.
The higher ups are, but they've been fighting a war for years and years and years and years. And at this point, their planet is wrecked. There's nothing left.
Well, we should get back to the destruction ray, neutron ray thing.
The neutrino ray. Yeah. Okay, so we have a scene where the professor has made sketches of the interior of the what's underneath the hill that this house is built on. That it's all been hollowed out. It's clearly a hangar of some sort. He's also made sketches of Brock and Exeter, and he's like, Ruth is like, notice their high foreheads. And even in the MST3K, they're like, no, really? I never noticed. Because it's really, really, really obvious. They decide that they need to get out of here. There's something very fishy going on. We need to take off. We need to go talk to the authorities. So Brock ends up monitoring all of this happening. Okay, so Brock is at the Interocitor. Exeter really doesn't know anything about this. So Meacham, Ruth, and the professor leave in the Woody. It's not a Woody. It's the Super Deluxe, all right? And they take off, and Brock starts using the neutrino rays against them. And Meacham and Ruth and the professor decide that they need to ditch out of this car and go on foot, because at the very least, they might be able to hide from whatever Brock is throwing at them.
At this time, I think Exeter is going to the spaceship.
Yes. That's why Exeter's not there. Otherwise, he would have stopped this. It's very clear from his character that
because
Exeter
the flying saucer takes off from that hill.
Oh, and by the way, the people that were involved with the movie, they specifically say that Brock was supposed to represent what the Metalunans had become over the years of the war, where Exeter represents what the Metalunans were. So that's why Brock is standoffish all the time. He's cold. He doesn't really care about the humans. Humans are below him, and he doesn't mind like playing with them, with the Interocitor. That the Metalunans have learned to be cruel because of this war. Now, who's at fault for this war? We'll get to it because there isn't anyone at fault, at least that we can tell. So Brock is firing the Interocitor at the Woody, the Deluxe, I'm sorry. And the professor decides, nope, I have to get out of here. I have to distract them while Ruth and Meacham get out.
And it wasn't clear until the very end of his thing, because they jump out.
Yeah, and they're like, come on. And he hits the gas.
He hits the gas. And then the ray blows it up. And what the other part that really got me was, why is one of the scientists out there near this lake that
He
they
had a
jump
gun.
in,
He was hunting
and he gets shot
because
for
he's
no
out there.
apparent
He's like
reason.
waving at them. It's the German scientist, and he gets blown away too.
And
But
he's one of those that's been messed with in the mind.
But it's because Brock is playing with the humans. The humans are beneath him.
Because you get that point when he asked to get up from the table,
Yeah.
that he's been
Yeah, he's been messed with. So Ruth and Meacham run back to the airfield to get into this little private plane, and
it's
Stinson 108,
108, and that was made in
1946, and it seems to have died in 2005. I can't find any information about it after 2005.
It's made in Warren, Michigan.
Yeah, so it's made in our home state. They end up going back to the airfield, and there's a glow that's surrounding the house on the hill back there, and it turns out the saucer is launching. They get in the plane to take off. The house explodes, so everybody else that was left in the house is dead. Okay.
Well, go Exeter.
Well, that I don't think that was Exeter.
You think it was?
I think it was Brock.
Brock that killed himself.
Brock didn't kill himself. Brock's on the freaking spaceship.
Was he?
Yes, he's the one that goes with his hand and does the whole come here thing.
Oh.
Yeah. Brock is still on the saucer. So they end up getting into the air, but then the UFO, this flying saucer, nabs them and drags them into its
bay.
Yeah, it's like cargo bay with like a tractor beam. Okay, so they are led to the bridge
with
by
the same
Brock.
green light.
With the green. They're led to the bridge by Brock, and Exeter talks to them. They're going to a planet called Metaluna, and they see on the screen that Earth is already getting small in the distance. Now, this is another thing that sets this island Earth apart from all the movies before it. In almost all science fiction movies, and definitely in high budget ones, humans don't leave Earth. All the aliens are coming to Earth.
Yeah,
so this is the first
Exeter
one that like
says something that's really funky.
Yeah, you're taking a journey that no other humans have ever taken.
He
before.
goes, we're out of this. Metaluna is not even in the solar system.
Yeah,
we're out in space.
Yeah,
but in our solar system, we're out in space.
Well, it's he's trying to explain it to them because they're kind of in shock, so he's having to talk down to them in a way.
And then there's that thermal barrier.
Yeah, there's the thermal barrier. The saucer starts heating up as they go through this thermal barrier, and there's like fire coming off of it. But finally, and if you did not notice, this set the saucer set is incredibly detailed. There's lots of money that got poured into it because as they're going through the thermal barrier, the lighting on the paneling changes all around them, and this happens all the time. That the lighting, the quality of the lighting, the tones of it change depending on where they are in their flight.
And and Exeter describes that they have artificial gravity.
They have artificial gravity because
he didn't call it artificial gravity, but
he says they create their own gravitational field. They need to put the crew into tubes because
Metaluna
has a much thicker atmosphere than Earth. And something about the atmosphere itself is different, and you have to be converted. It's like the conversion tubes. You have to go into these tubes to convert to be able to exist on Metaluna, just like everybody from Metaluna has to go through these tubes to go to Earth. So, okay. Anyway, they get in there, and as Meacham and Ruth are in the tubes, they have to dodge an asteroid because you always have to dodge asteroids in these movies. That's just standard, right? As they approach Metaluna, 2 meteors are launched at the saucer, and neutrino beams defend the ship from being hit. It turns out these are Zagon manned meteors. I think they're called Zagons. And the Zagons basically have these little ships, and they grab asteroids
and chuck it,
and they're throwing rocks basically. And hey, physics is a bitch. Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space.
They bring it into the planet and then fly off.
Yes, but they're hurling asteroids at saucers or at Metaluna. They end up, as they approach Metaluna, we see that there's a force field that is surrounding Metaluna, the planet. And below the force field, Metaluna is a shithole.
It looks like a cratered sponge cake.
It is a wasteland. There is nothing
With-
living on the surface at all
with
anymore.
some beat up mountains.
Yes. In fact, as they're coming in, what we see is that Metaluna...
And it's really good.
Oh, very good. All of this stuff is very good. That the Metalunans that are still left alive are having to live below the surface because the surface of the planet is absolutely lifeless. And it's because while there's this force shield protecting Metaluna, the force shield is only like 99% effective. So sometimes these asteroids get through and hit the surface and wreck things.
They never said why the Zargons are after them.
Yeah, they never do. Who's at fault for this war? Who knows? But here's the other thing. The amount of energy needing to be expended on this force field is incredible. And that's why the Metalunans
need uranium to fuel their force field.
And they've been using humans to help do research to try to improve their own technology to help improve this force field. But here's the problem. Metaluna is a wreck. There's nothing left. They have exhausted their planet's resources. For whatever reason, they've decided that they can't mine asteroids or other planets, and their force field is slowly failing.
Well, I could understand that because anytime they'd leave their planet,
the Zagons
were attacking them.
Yeah. So they have to land at a spaceport below the surface in a very, very, very cool scene.
The city's there.
They take a tram car to the control center, and the controller, the monitor, the guy that was the reporter from the thing, he's sitting on like a throne, and he's controlling the war, basically. Okay, so
it's
says that
similar to the chair that
Exeter
has on the ship. It's glass.
It's wavy
cubes,
glass blocks.
And then two pillars that actually have controls on.
Yeah, they have those disc controls as well. Like so, at the very least, the production staff decided to make the technology on the different pieces that they have of Metaluna. Like the interocitor has the same kind of controls that the chairs do. I thought that was a nice touch.
And I like the on the ship. There's these weird chairs that look like you said. You made a comment because that's what.
There's a reason for that.
They look like boards, but I was like, that makes more sense than some of these.
Because they can tilt depending on the gravity or whatever.
It makes sense more than the doggone lounge chairs.
Well, yeah. Oh, and there was one female Metalunan crew member on the saucer, but
and she's the tube.
She's the only woman.
Tube control.
Yeah, she's the tube controller. She's the only female Metalunan that we ever see.
And you want to talk about those uniforms?
I'll talk about the uniforms after we're done with the plot, because
Okay.
we're getting very close to the end here. The monitor basically says that the survivors of Metaluna are going to be moved to Earth because Metaluna is a freaking wasteland. And it's not that there are a ton of Metalunans. There aren't. There are very few of them left. But it's also very clear that what Metalunans there are will be in charge of Earth because humans are beneath them. Remember,
and they're going to brain reprogram people.
Yeah, so they can be used. And remember, again, these are the modern quote-unquote Metalunans. It's very clear that, again, Exeter represents what Metalunans used to be, these kind of kind people. And Exeter's like, no, we can't do this. The monitor orders Meacham and Ruth to be put under the thought transformer. Exeter kind of pretends to go with it, and he leads them out and says, I'm not going to do this to you. And then they encounter the mutant, and the mutant is a mutant insect, much like the insects of Earth, just larger and more intelligent,
and with
of course.
A huge brain.
He's got a huge brain. And by the way, I will talk about that costume again before we're done here. I know this is getting a long review because this movie is fantastic. We've been talking about lots of different things. More attacks occur on Metaluna. They're able to escape. We think the mutant is actually crushed under some rocks, but everybody is able to get back to the ship. Everybody, as in Exeter, Meacham, and Ruth, because it seems like all the other Metalunans are dead. They all get killed in this last attack. They launch the saucer, and Exeter looks back on Metaluna as the shield fails, and the number of asteroids coming in increase, and finally it just liquefies Metaluna's surface. He says it's a new sun, but it really is that there's just been so much kinetic energy poured into the planet from all these asteroid hits that it just vaporizes, basically.
But there's a mutant that got on board.
There's a mutant that gets on board. Ruth and Meacham and Exeter are inside the tubes when it stumbles onto the bridge. Ruth is almost ravaged by it, but since it hasn't had conversion to Earth conditions, and the ship's the ship's environmental controls are going back to Earth.
I don't know why she didn't stay in the tube.
Because the tube raised on its own. It was done. So she was let free. But after a little bit, the mutant finally dies because of the atmospheric conditions. It falls over and evaporates.
Well, it's bleeding right in front of her.
Yeah, it's already been wounded from the attack on Metaluna.
And she keeps screaming, and I'm like, I would be like, oh my God, I don't want to see this poor creature just sit there and bleed out.
Well, yeah, it is, but it's also insane with the pain. It's gone crazy, and that's why
I'd
it's
understand it that too, but
yeah.
I wouldn't sit there and scream about it, I don't think.
So the mutant evaporates. Exeter tells them to get into their plane and leave. Meacham understands that Exeter is basically unable to go anywhere else because he's used the last of his ship's power to bring them back to Earth. So they say goodbye to Exeter, knowing that Exeter is basically just going to die. They ditch out in their plane, in the plane that's in the cargo bay still, and Exeter ends up augering his ship directly into the Pacific Ocean.
And not taking out the whale ship.
Yeah, the whaling ship, the fishing ship. The end, okay?
Damn, he didn't take out the whale ship.
So
he should have.
Now, before we get into a little more of the stuff, obviously we're recommending this film, right? There's a few things that I have learned about in this, and it's generally that the mutant costume was incredibly awful to wear because, again, in Technicolor, to film Technicolor, you need incredibly bright lights. And that means hot lights. And the mutant costume was so thick with rubber and heavy that the actor inside had to have the eyes pulled out of the costume to drain the water from his sweat out of it. That, in fact, when the mutant is getting up after it collapses against the tube before it dies, you can actually see the water, the sweat sloshing around inside the eyes.
Ew.
In that shot. It's that bad. The guy had a hard time breathing inside because of the pooling of his sweat. It was that bad. The costumes on the ship, the jumpsuits, let's talk about those. Talk about those, Darlene.
Well, Aaron was asking me about
because there's only two women.
There's two
on
women. One of them happens to be Dr. Ruth, and the other one is the other Metalunan. And I'm like, that's just easy to do.
Okay, what is easy to do?
The cupping of the breast and the
because the women's uniforms were basically the same as the men's, except they clearly were tailored.
They tailored them with just a cutout for the breast and cut the waist down.
Okay.
I've done that on other
outfits. You call it a princess cut or something.
I call it because they're in the 1960s and 70s. There's this princess style. You can probably still get it in the store.
Yeah.
Dress that comes down below right above your knees.
Okay.
And it's basically a long sleeve shirt that's been tailored.
Okay.
It's basically what it is.
So it's tailored, but all of these jumpsuits are incredibly tight. And according to
the
Faith,
females are horribly tight.
According to Faith,
they
Domargue,
didn't measure them. Right.
According to Faith Domargue, who played Dr. Ruth on this, she said her costume was so tight that she couldn't sit down in it because it would tear. So that's where those boards that they sat on, the reclining boards, because she couldn't sit. If she bent over too much, it would split up her butt. And she said it was also so tight that she couldn't wear underwear. Otherwise, you would see her underwear. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. You should never have a costume like that, because that must have just been miserable. And the thing is, the guys' jumpsuits are also really tight, but it's clear that Faith's was ridiculously tight.
And I could see some kind of problem, like when I made an outfit for a kid. She stuck her stomach in, and I had to add. You can't mess with your tailor.
Yes.
When they're making you clothes, don't go, I want it looking slimmer, so I'll stuck in my gut and my...
Yeah.
Don't do that, because you're going to end up with clothes that are too tight for you.
Now, she had a really bad time on this film in almost every way. I mean, all the saucer stuff at the end, when they're in space at Metaluna with this jumpsuit, it was awful because she had a hard time moving around in it without tearing it just from moving around. But where they jump in the water when Brock is attacking them with the interocitor, when they're trying to escape originally, when she jumped into the water, that's a real lake out in California. I watched the they talk about it in the documentary, that we actually see it a few times in other movies like The Mummy Returns and things like that. It's the lake that in Frankenstein the villagers paddle across as they're hunting the monster. Like, it's that same lake. But when they jumped into it, I guess, first of all, the explosions that they were using for the neutrino ray attacks were practical on set. And they were so powerful that Faith was afraid that she would be injured, but the lake was so cold she had a hard time ducking under the water. So Rex Reason, the guy that played Meacham, had to actually drag her under. And you see that in the shot that they used, that he actually pulls her under because it was so cold she didn't want to go under. And she was glad that she went under because the explosion was so powerful that she felt it even underwater. Now, when she got out, the clay mud that was in the lake was so bad that, I guess, according to her, she could not get it out of her hair, out of her, just off of her. It was caked in so bad that her assistant had to strip her naked at her trailer and scrub her down the whole night to get it off.
They do continuity, though. And
she's messed up.
There's mud on both of them when they come out of the plane.
Now, I guess Rex Reason said that he was covered in the mud too, but he just went home. Like, and she didn't want to because she didn't want to get into her car with all that mud. And it was really tacky clay, like mucky clay.
I could see that.
Yeah, I can see it. I've had mud where we've had mud at a reenacting event where it was incredibly bad that we had to sit outside with a garden hose hosing ourselves off before we went into a hotel.
Yeah, and that poor old lady that was stuck in the mud that took 4 people to get
Oh yeah, an old lady got stuck in it. She wasn't a reenactor.
We had
a tank got stuck.
We had our Russian boots. The girl was wearing too big of our Russian boots.
Oh yeah, and the boots
and
just
the boots were sunk into the mud.
Yeah,
and they had to dig them out of the mud. And these go up to your knee.
So we understand mud, and we understand Faith in this behind the scenes thing. Hey, we get it. This is not an actress being like foofy or something like that. We get it.
Okay, when you come to the door of a hotel and you knock, you say hi.
You try to get
Can we use your hose out there so we're not tracking this mud in? And he runs to get the key.
Yeah, so we can use the hose. And we sat outside spraying each other with a hose for like an hour and a half. Man, that's a story though. Okay, so anyway, there's lots of interesting behind the scenes stuff. Obviously, they used really, really good quality special effects on this. They spent a lot of money on special effects. That's one of the things that works. I will say right off, 95% of this movie to me works.
What doesn't though?
There are things that don't work. There are a couple things that don't.
I like the matte paintings of the planet really well. I didn't like the picture that they gave of Earth when they were retreating.
They use that that planet is actually what they use for Universal's logo forever.
Maybe
for
that's
2
why I
decades.
didn't like. Maybe that's why I
'Cause you
didn't
always
like
see
it.
it?
I always see it, and I was just like, "This is tacky or something." It just that's what.
Do you remember the old Universal logo that's like on the Dracula? It's a stylized globe that spins. That's like, I can't even describe it. The older Universal logo, it in black and white. It has like Universal that rotates around it. The mechanism for that was used for the Atom thing in this movie.
Oh, and that's a cool prop too.
Oh yeah, the Atom prop. Yeah, very cool.
That's
Very
on
cool.
the ship.
So the only things that I will say don't work. Only things.
And
very
that
few.
Atom thing should have went into a museum as artwork.
Oh hell yes. There's only a couple things that don't work in this movie. When they're on Metaluna and they're in the shuttle car, they're chroma keyed into a backdrop of a very cool matte painting. But the lighting on them makes it look like they are very badly chroma keyed in or composited in. It's the one time I think honestly special effects don't work in it.
And that picture is taken twice.
But it's a fantastic matte painting. That's the thing.
It's run twice because if you look at it, it's the exact same film. And I have a problem with that. You know, I know it's hard to do that stuff, but maybe not take it and do it the same footage in the same movie.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
The only other thing that I think I can criticize this movie for, only other thing, is that I think that the explanation of why things are happening isn't very clear. Like, okay, yes, we understand the war. That's why the Metalunans are on Earth. That's why they're using humans. But like, why is this war happening? Why does it turn into like an alien invasion movie?
Need to know. Did they need to know?
And
was there enough time to explain all that?
No, what I'm saying is I think it's something extra that you don't need in the film. I don't think it needed to be there.
And one of the things I thought is why they brought these people back, and I don't know why Exeter brought them back
to Metaluna.
When Metaluna was going to
the Monitor ordered them back to be brought there because they were the top of humanity's scientists, and that they could be used on Metaluna to build everything that they need.
Except that he was already planning to take over Earth.
Yes, because all the Monitor wanted was to buy enough time for them to be able to get the surviving Metalunans to Earth. It's not like they had a ton of saucers. They don't. They might have 2 or 3 left. That's it. And Exeter's is the only one that's able to get off Metaluna at the end. Point is that there's more Metalunans that could fit into the few saucers that they had, so they had to buy enough time to get everybody to Earth. I get that. That makes sense. But I'm saying the only thing that really doesn't work in addition to that one special effects shot is I don't think the alien invasion bit needed to be in the movie. It literally could have been, you didn't even have to mention it. It was just, hey, we got Meacham and Ruth to Metaluna. Crap. This isn't working. We don't even have to threaten them with the thought transformer.
Yeah.
This isn't working. The shield is failing. We don't have enough time.
We need to get you off planet again with a few of ours.
It's our fault that you're here, and we're going to save you because it's our fault that you're here, and you don't deserve that. Like, that would have put a much more sympathetic spin on the Metalunans as a whole. Obviously, Exeter is sympathetic. He is trying to be the good scientist, the moral person, and I really respect the character.
Could that be more of a like we have Republicans and Democrats? Could it be 2 different like viewpoints, political viewpoints? One is run by the Monitor, not controller, Monitor.
What are you talking about?
Exeter is part of this.
No, what the implication was, because they're, again, in this documentary, when they interviewed Jeff Morrow, the guy that plays Exeter, in the original script, Exeter is just as cold as everybody else. That he's just as cruel as everybody else. But Jeff Morrow said, Absolutely not. I want to play this guy like he is a actual scientist, that he has sympathy for the humans, that he's not wanting to abuse them. He's wanting to save his planet, and he'll do whatever he can to save his planet, but not at the cost of his morality. Where the other Metalunans have been so emotionally battered by this war that they're willing to do anything it takes to live. Okay? It's not that there's two political viewpoints on Metaluna. There's one. And Exeter's like the only remaining person that's really fighting against that. And partially it's because he's been on Earth the longest. That's what Jeff Morrow said. I'm going to play it like Exeter has been on Earth longer than any of the other Metalunans. That he's been here. He's lived with humans. And even the character even says this. I've lived with them. I know them. They don't deserve this. He even says that in the film. And it makes him a very sympathetic character. And yes, a character. Exeter is a character. Ruth is a character.
And Cal is a character.
Cal is a character.
I can't even say that Steve was.
Ooh, Dr. Steve? No, he's not. But the three leads, Jeff Morrow as Exeter, Faith Domargue as Dr. Ruth Adams, and Rex Reason as Dr. Meacham, those are three characters. There's a reason why this movie is a classic. It's not only because it is visually gorgeous. It's not that it is interesting, that it actually continues to keep you engaged. It's that the three leads are all characters with their own motivations, their own passions and drives. Ruth a little bit less than Meacham and Exeter, fair enough, because I don't think they wrote her character very well. But Faith really does put a lot of effort into making Ruth a character. Again, we recommend this film, correct?
Yeah. No. Well, how can you not recommend one of the
This is one of the best.
one of the classics of this age?
This is up. I would say this is up with Forbidden Planet. That this is up with Monolith Monsters, War of the Worlds, Time Machine. This is a movie that I don't think gets enough credit. This is a movie that I think if you're a modern filmmaker, you need to watch to see what practical effects can do. Again, that scene where they're coming into Metaluna and we see the surface that's all blasted. That's a real camera on a real set that they built this blasted surface, that they're flying a saucer with a flying rig over this surface, and they have practical explosions on set. Like, guys, watch this to show. Like, I know that in Star Wars Episode 4, they did a lot of the same kinds of things with these motion rigs, with practical effects on practical sets that they build.
But today, that's extremely expensive to do it that way when you can do it by computer.
No, here's the thing. I agree that doing things with a computer to enhance something with CGI is fine. But a practical model, like for a spaceship, or a practical miniature set enhanced by CGI is 1,000 times better than just CGI, because you get the Star Wars prequels where suddenly it just doesn't look real because it's all CGI.
Okay.
That you do a practical thing and then enhance it. Sure, of course.
The prequels were...
It was too much. I don't even think you can do a proper...
I don't think there was any plot to it, and there was no characters. So that's a horrible movies to...
This is... I'm not comparing it. This is... Man, this Island Earth is one of the best. And it does almost everything correct. And it does not get credit for it. Now, the filmmakers do feel that the mutant was a mistake. That they shouldn't have been in.
Yeah, because that really shows their use of slavery. And if you get into that side, if you get that far into your...
See, I don't know. I don't think it's slavery. Because they're more intelligent, but they're not...
They were engineered to be their servants. He even says it.
But they're animals. I think they're supposed to be animals. They're not supposed to be people. And that's Exeter saying that. Remember, and Exeter is supposed to be sympathetic. Like, he's like, no, they're animals, more intelligent than your animals, insects on Earth, of course. But they're insects. Now, that being said, even though the filmmakers thought that the mutant might have been a mistake to put in there, you look at that mutant,
And
and
that's
that
what
is
sticks you
it
in
is
the head.
iconic. It is an iconic movie monster. To the extent that it's, if you find books on 1950s movie monsters, it's always going to be near the top of what's covered. Now, yeah, again, the costume itself was miserable. It was filled with sweat that they had to drain it out of the eye holes. If you get the Blu-ray for This Island Earth, watch that documentary. It's absolutely fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I think we were going to leave the review at that, but since this is 100, I wanted to talk about where we're going to go for our future next 100 on Earth versus Soup. And
We're
Darlene,
already an hour out.
I know. Well, it's episode 100. Everybody should be kind of interested in what we're going to say. Obviously, it's a classic, so that's why we spent a little bit of time on it. But I'm not going to spend too much time talking about our next 100. But I did want to say what we had been talking about. We have easily another 300, 400 films that we can find for the 1950s and 60s in science fiction. We can. But there's one thing that we have noticed in the past 100 films that we have done. It's that it feels like a lot of times we get into a rut with them. That it's another bug-eyed monster movie. It's another film with teenagers necking in cars and something menaces them in the night, right?
And always meteors attacking the spaceships.
Yeah, so we have decided that while the core of Earth versus Soup is 1950s and 60s science fiction, that we are going to expand backwards a bit.
Well, we're also going to go a little bit forward
A
because you
little bit.
You want to do.
There's a couple films,
some Russian films,
Soviet films from the 1970s that are incredibly influential on science fiction that most people don't know. But it's 99% of the movies that we've been talking about that we should talk about are actually prior to the 1950s. So 1940s, 1930s, King Kong, even into the 1920s. And it's to give an idea to everyone listening where science fiction came from to even get to the 1950s and 60s. Because Earth versus Soup has always been about talking about how the 1950s and 60s science fiction really has influenced us today as people that enjoy movies, that people that enjoy science fiction in general, like know your roots, right? But in order to understand your roots, you have to really go back to some of the firsts. And some of those firsts, as like, if you want to just talk about classic movies that everyone knows about, how can you not talk about Metropolis? It's incredibly important. How can you not talk about Dracula with Bela Lugosi? Even though that's not really science fiction, the thing is that Bela Lugosi really gets his name there. A lot of the techniques that Universal uses in making those early movies like Dracula and Frankenstein go into what happens in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. A lot of those Hammer horror films that we've been talking about that are from the 50s and 60s are almost indistinguishable from science fiction anyway, in many of the tropes. Yeah, they might be considered quote-unquote horror, but they have science fiction elements in them, like mad scientists, people that are struggling against nature, that kind of thing, or monsters. Whether those monsters are aliens that are invading or if they're zombies. If they're zombies that are...
He wants to expand on what we're doing, is what he's saying.
I want to expand it, but I'm trying to explain why. I'm trying to explain why. And I hope that everybody understands. Like I said, the core of our show is always going to be 1950s and 60s. But I want to touch on movies that are outside of that a little bit to give you a bigger perspective. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Darlene? Like what you want to do in the next 100?
I always just look for them at the time.
You just look for them at the time.
Yep.
But you've already been talking about Abbott and Costello movies.
Yeah, but that's the thing. They're a comedy, and I fear watching Abbott and Costello now because the last time I ever watched Abbott and Costello, I was in my 20s.
And you might feel differently now.
And I'll definitely feel different about them.
And we're not just saying like a random Abbott Costello movie. There's Abbott and Costello Go to Mars. Like there's clearly science fiction things that we can do. Or Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy.
There was one movie that you said you would never do. The Fly?
Oh, because I don't like The Fly. For whatever reason, there's only 2 science fiction movies from the 1950s and 60s that I absolutely despise. And The Fly is the lesser of those. I hate Incredible Shrinking Man. I just, and I'm sorry for people that are fans of that out there. I hate it. And it's probably just because I watched it at a really bad time in my childhood. And I have really negative feelings towards it. It's the same thing with The Fly.
And it's like that. It's that I don't want to watch the Abbott and Costello ones because I don't want to ruin what.
But we can try. We can try, right? And it's the same thing. You know what, Darlene? I can try to watch The Fly again. And try to like disconnect myself from like the whatnot that happened. I think I probably can say that I would, one of the first times I actually sat down to watch it, it was right near the time that my grandfather died. And so I just kind of connect it with being really, really sad. And so I'm explaining
my thing with
to
Abbott
everybody
and Costello is that my opinion of comedy has changed really drastically.
Yeah.
I don't laugh at things like
you used to.
I used to.
Well, you get older, you get jaded, right? Here's the thing. I grew up watching The Time Machine, War of the Worlds. I still love those movies. We've talked about those movies on this podcast. I still love them. Do I love them for different reasons? Yeah, I do. Very different reasons from when I was a kid. Because I'll tell you what, War of the Worlds, I loved it because it was bright. It was action. It was all this really like cool saucers. As a kid, I didn't get like these really interesting plot drives or the interesting character bits or like the idea of the end of the world and people going to the church and praying and like, you know, the lighting up the stained glass. Like I get more out of it now. So maybe your opinion will change. We can try. And I can try too, right? She looks at me on an audio podcast. So, we hope you enjoyed listening to our episode 100. If you want us to go over again our like all the movies that we've done in Earth versus Soup again as like an overview episode, like we did for episode 50, like our extra long episode 50, maybe we can do that, but you're going to have to ask us to do it because I don't want to just do it willy-nilly.
Oh my goodness.
Because that's 100
Some of them
episodes.
I can't even remember.
See, some of them I've forgotten, and that's probably the most damning of them. Like the ones that you just can't remember what the hell happened. But it's the ones that
always damning.
That's the damning one. I mean, there's ones that I will hate still.
But you'll still remember.
I'll remember them, but I hate them because I
Rocket
Attack USA is one of them.
And you left to answer email for
Creeping
Terror, and you left me watching it.
Rocket Attack USA. God, I hated that movie. It's still, see, that's the thing. As much as I connect The Fly with being like really, really sad, I'd rather watch The Fly than Rocket Attack USA again.
Well, I'm just like the Creeping Terror. A doggone high school student could do better than that.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene.
Good
night.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.